Hi. Good morning and welcome to Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules on July 10th, 2025. Before we get started, we'll do introductions to my left.
Morning, Damian Leonard, Office of Legislative Counsel.
Representative Mark Higley, representing the Orleans Memorial District.
I'm Senator Rob Plunkett, representing the district.
Scott Beck, Senator, Caledonia District.
Larry Sackwitz, representative from Randolph. Seth Bongard from the Bennington Center District.
Representative Trevor Squirrel from Underhill and Jericho. And on line.
Senator Dave Weeks, representing Rutland County.
Emery Mathias, Mideast.
Hi. Welcome, everybody. First time on the agenda are the minutes from June 26, 2025.
Mr. Chair, I've got a question on the minutes. Just curious, like the last time we had Lcar, I was zooming in as well and was asked afterwards if I wanted my vote to count. And
Yes.
I think there's three that we need to use, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Just curious as to whether that should be reflected in the minutes, that the individuals that are zooming in are voting or not. I'm just curious. It doesn't.
Well, it's a good question. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
Damien?
That is a good question. Previously, I hadn't indicated one way or the other, but going forward, I could add an indication that you were remote and voting or not voting. So just in parentheses next to it, would that work?
I think so. And also, I think when there is a vote, if there is a dissenting vote, you usually indicate that as well, too.
Yes,
So
that's correct.
I think it might be important to indicate that, a zooming individual was allowed to vote.
Okay.
And it would keep track of, the number of times that we chose to vote remotely.
Okay. Are you asking for us to edit the minutes?
It's up to Damien. If you think you could do it easy enough this time.
I just made the edit.
Okay.
So I can either say remote or on Zoom. What's your preference?
On Zoom?
Okay, on Zoom. And then it says in parentheses on Zoom, voting.
Yep.
Great. All set.
All right. Any other comments, questions? A motion?
So move.
Approve the changes.
With the changes? Yeah.
Okay. All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. First rule up today is Rule 25P15, rules of the Vermont Employment Security Board. Jared Adler, Staff Attorney, Department of Labor.
Thank you, Representative. My name is actually Robert Depper. I'm the General Counsel for the Department of Labor. Mr. Adler was out of town this week.
Sorry, what was the name again?
Robert Depper, D-E-P-P-E-R, like pepper, but with a D. Shall I say?
No, please. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Senators, Representatives, Committee members. We are here because we have modifications to technically Code of Vermont Regulations 24-005-001, commonly referred to as the Employment Security Board rules. As you may know, Act 184, made in the second half of the last biennium in 2024, made modifications to Vermont unemployment insurance law, which provided an overpayment waiver mechanism that we didn't have previously. And that directed the department to promulgate necessary rules to implement that act. The modifications to the statute were in 21 VSA 1347, and which allowed us to waive those repayments to claimants in certain situations where the overpayment was not due to the fault of the claimant and would be against equity and good conscience. Specifically, the changes that we made in substance to the Employment Security Board rules were Rule 2H, where we inserted a definition of contrary to equity and good conscience. Rule 2L, a fault definition, as in no fault of the person. And we also created a Rule 32 which waive repayment of overpaid benefits, describing the notice rights and requests, how you do that. The application for waiver overpayment, describing the general application procedure. Determinations on waiver applications, that describes the determination content. When you find out you have the option for a waiver application, and the hearing procedure, describing the rules that govern circumstances on appeal. Now, there were some other modifications, but they were just technical modifications to make the rules in conformity, changing some numbering, that sort of thing, formatting issue. I'm happy to take any questions that the committee may have.
Any members, Representative Higley?
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure, looking through it, that, there was a comment made by Representative Marcotte as far as whether or not the statute could also include within the rule as well. And I'm just wondering if that did happen.
I saw the same comment. I'm not sure if it happened or what that actually means. Damien, can you tell me what he's getting to?
So, in the comments that the department received from Vermont Legal Aid, they had requested that certain provisions in the statute also be repeated in the rule. And I believe the department, when Ledge Council, I believe we raised that issue with the department, and it was responded to by the department in the memo. So I think Attorney Depper could respond to that.
Sure, absolutely. We haven't added that yet, and we wanted to kind of have this conversation with the committee because the concern that we have with just wholesale putting statutory language into the rule is really twofold. And I understand, frequently there is this perception that if you do that, it makes it easier for people to find. My experience is that it actually has the opposite effect. That when you have the statute and the rule that say the same thing, it actually adds confusion. And also, over time, if you just put the statute into the rule, the statute may change. And so we've seen this in a couple of other agencies that as the statute changes over time, the rule may not change at the same time. And so what you wind up getting over time is kind of an aggregate of mismatches between the rule and the statute. And so without the statutory language in there, the department's position is that that actually gives the rule longevity and efficacy longer than it might have otherwise. Also, when you add, anytime you add verbiage into a rule, you run the risk of getting erroneous interpretations or interpretations outside of the statute down the road. So we haven't done that yet. We're certainly happy to have that conversation if the committee would like.
Yes, Mr. Chair, just, in talking with Representative Marcotte as well, and he explained it in his note that said that, folks may not know that they must also look at the underlying statute as well as the rule for full understanding of the law. And I don't know if that means something as simple as a link included in the rule or whatever, but it does sound like some folks have a concern that they need to look at the full boat statutes as well as the rules.
Yeah, and I think the issue you're raising would not just apply here, would apply across all rulemaking, right? I mean, in essence.
Yeah, so one thing that is often done is agencies will provide guidance that summarizes both the statute and the rules. And so we do see in some statutes repetition, or some rules repetition of the statute, but very frequently the rules are filling in the gaps where the statute, may spell out sort of the broad parameters, and then the rule fills in the details of what's the procedure for getting that relief. So for example, we're going to be doing fish and wildlife rules later on. We don't spell out the specifics of all the details of how the permits, the hunting licenses are issued. The department does that. But then the guidance is provided based on the statute and the rule. So it's maybe an instance where an alternative option would be to ask the department to provide guidance for individuals so they know what the statute provides, what the rules provide, and so forth. And then the guidance can be updated more easily than rules. So it doesn't require going through formal rulemaking again to update it. Instead, the department can reissue guidance without filing with the Secretary of State and so forth. So that may be an alternative. And it's something that we do frequently, for example, even with things like building codes, energy codes, et cetera. Oftentimes there's guidance that comes out to help people figure out how to navigate everything if they can't necessarily find the statute and the rules and so forth. And oftentimes for the layperson, the way things are worded in the statutes anyway, or in the rules can be confusing. So having some plain language guidance is helpful. So that may be something that would be an alternative here.
Is that something that you folks would consider?
Oh, absolutely, Representative. Wouldn't have a problem with that at all.
Good. And I should just clarify, I think I said earlier that the issue had been addressed in the response. If I'm remembering correctly, I was just looking at the response. It's not addressed in the response. We had a conversation, my colleague Sophie Zadatny and I had a conversation with Attorney Depper a couple of days ago about that issue, but it wasn't in the response. So just want to be clear about that. That was a verbal conversation, not a written exchange.
Other questions, comments? One of the things that's come up in some information I've just recently read, there was some concern from Vermont Legal Aid about some definitional changes. I mean, well, they felt like that how you were defining certain terms was different in one place as opposed to another place. Maybe you can speak to that.
Sure. Well, specifically which terms? So there,
I think no fault or contrary to equity and good conscience are two things I see here.
Okay, thank you very much, Representative. So the fault definition, we had gotten some comments about the fault definition, and the definition of fault that we used and the way we constructed that was consistent or is consistent with how Massachusetts does it, how Maine does it, and how New Jersey does it. Now, those were important states for us because they're all in Region 1 with us, and Region 1 being the U.S. Department of Labor. They group certain states together. And so that was the approach of fault that those states took. Our other sister states, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Rhode Island, don't really have definitions of fault. And to the extent that they do waive any sort of overpayments, it's very discretionary, very open-ended. New York has no waiver generally. They have a very kind of a much stricter statute than we do now. And so in the broad definition, that is what we were looking at to some degree. But also, you know, I am aware that legal aid wanted some, you know, including department delay, conflicting and confusing information, those types of things. Some of those we didn't put in because we did use the term significant and unconscionable financial hardship, which we thought was broad enough to encompass those types of things. And, you know, again, part of it is, and again, a verbiage problem, and the fact that we as a department have to take this language and try to implement it in a way that is both consistent and transparent. And we have to do that with you know, adjudicators. We've got about 10, 12 adjudicators that we then have to explain all of this to and have them hopefully make consistent decisions for each claimant that comes before them. So getting too specific sometimes can add confusion and limit the ability of the department to provide the intent of the legislative intent to give this broad overpayment waiver potentially. And so that was one reason why we didn't add a whole lot more detail. And then of course, as you know, as perspectives change, as circumstances change, we wanted to have the absolute maximum ability to implement the legislature's intent in that regard.
Other questions, comment? Have a motion?
Make a motion, we approve 25 P15 Department of Labor's Rules of Vermont Employment Security Board as amended by the department in materials that were submitted on July 3rd, 2025.
Okay, we have a motion from Representative Higley to approve the rule. Any additional discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Maybe excuse.
May.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. Okay, next up is Rule 25 P16 Supervised Billing. Ashley Berliner.
Oh, she is on Zoom here. Ashley, can you hear us?
Oh,
there we
Yes,
go.
sorry, it took a second to unmute there.
okay,
Can
you're
you hear
up.
me?
Please proceed.
Okay. For the record, I'm the Director of Medicaid Policy for the Agency of Human Services, Ashley Berliner, and I am here today to talk about the supervised billing rules. The Agency of Human Services is proposing to amend our Healthcare Administrative Rule 9.103 supervised billing to clarify existing program and policy requirements and to restructure the supervised billing program to reflect provider feedback and reduce confusion. We've done a lot of outreach on this bill. The version of the rule before you was developed in conjunction with the Department of Health, the Office of Professional Regulation, Vermont Legal Aid, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont, the Medicaid and Exchange Advisory Committee, and a number of other departments across the Agency of Human Services, as well as hundreds of mental health providers across the state of Vermont. We've held multiple informal open forums to answer questions, clear up confusion, and share the draft rules with providers. And we also held 3 public forums and multiple one-on-one meetings to ensure that the rule was clear and address the concerns of providers. We will also hold multiple open forums to help providers enroll, and we'll be issuing comprehensive manual to supplement the rule and elaborate on the new provisions and requirements ahead of the 1/1/2026 effective date. Because the purpose of this rule amendment is to align with the healthcare administrative rules with existing practice and coverage policies, we don't anticipate that there will be any environmental or economic impacts. The rule was necessary to ensure continued alignment with federal and state guidance and laws for covered service within Vermont Medicaid, but it doesn't change who is allowed to practice or what services they may provide. The key changes of this rule are updating common terminology to reduce confusion, removing applied behavioral analysts to follow correct coding, removing certified alcohol and drug counselors and apprenticed addiction professionals to follow correct coding, aligning with the Office of Professional Regulation under 27 Vermont statute. This change was done to align with upcoming Office of Professional Regulation requirements for mental health professionals coming out of the mental health licensing study, including changes to the roster. It also clarifies eligibility requirements. We heard from providers that criteria for supervisees and supervisors was unclear, so this version of the rule clarifies eligibility criteria to reduce that confusion and increase compliance. It also removes the 5-year billing limitation and subsequently the enrollment of supervisees. We heard from a significant number of providers and legislators that the 5-year billing limit in the supervised billing rule was harming providers. So to address that concern and still ensure that Medicaid members were receiving the same level of care as privately insured individuals, we will be enrolling supervisees in Vermont Medicaid. This will allow us to give folks the time that they need to obtain licensure and ensure that supervisees are meeting all minimum and state and federal requirements. And finally, it clarifies non-reimbursable services. This section was updated to outline all non-reimbursable services in rule. And those are the major changes coming out of the rule.
Okay, thank you. Committee, questions, comments? I have none. Devoners.
We approve G5, P16, Agency of Human Services, revised bill.
We have a motion from Senator Baumgartner to approve the rule. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Ash.
Bye.
Okay. All right, so next up, we have a bunch of fish and wildlife rules, huh? You are Hannah.
Yes.
Have a seat, please. And the first one up is Rule 25P11, rule governing the importation and possession of cervids from chronic wasting disease, endemic areas, and captive hunt or farm facilities.
Yes. And for the record, my name's Hannah Smith. I'm General Counsel with the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And we've proposed changes to 4 different fish and wildlife rules, beginning with Section 17, which has a long name. We've been colloquially calling it the carcass import rule. The primary change here is to remove reference to deer and elk and replace it with the word cervids, because that captures the entire group of animals that could potentially carry chronic wasting disease. And the intention of the rule is to prevent chronic wasting disease from reaching Vermont. So the changes to the rules are just a strike through of reference to deer and elk, replacing it with cervids. Primarily, this captures moose, which can carry chronic wasting disease. I would like to also request, there's one other change that was a change from the proposed rule to the final proposed rule. We amended the language in the very last section. This is section 5, which defines captive hunting facilities and farm facilities. Previously, farm facilities had referred broadly to any facility with captive cervids held in fenced or walled enclosures. In Vermont, farm facilities that house cervids are regulated by the Agency of Ag. And so the proposed change in the final proposed rule is to include language that says, for the purpose of this rule, farm facilities do not include facilities located in Vermont that are in compliance with the provisions of the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets rules governing captive cervidae. This is supposed to, without this change, there was this odd unintentional prohibition where you could have a captive farm facility in compliance with the Agency of Ag's rules. You could harvest animals in compliance with those rules, but technically, according to our rules, you couldn't possess the carcass of that animal until it was processed. It was an unintentional conflict between the two rules because our rules only allow you to possess animals from farm facilities once they've been processed. The intention of our rule is to prevent import from out of state. So we're proposing this amendment to exempt farm facilities that are regulated by Ag in state. We believe that the rules that Ag implements are adequate to protect those herds that are being managed in the state from the spread of chronic wasting disease. In addition to that, I had a conversation with the general counsel with the Agency of Ag, and I got some feedback, unfortunately, after I filed the final proposed rule with you all. And I would request one additional minor change to that sentence. The language that was submitted to the committee read, located in Vermont that are in compliance with the provisions of the Agency of Ag's rule. I would request that it read, facilities located in Vermont that are subject to the provisions of the Agency of Ag's rule.
So where are you right now?
This is section 5.2 of the rule.
It's the very end of the rule.
Very last sentence of the rule.
Yeah, I'm looking at the annotated. I was just looking at the clean copy.
Okay. Yeah, so instead of in compliance with, subject to, I mean, the issue with in compliance with is that The Department of Fish and Wildlife's intention is not to ensure that these farm facilities are in compliance with every aspect of the Agency of Ag's rule. We believe that those facilities, and it's a limited number of facilities in the state that are regulated and subject to those rules. We trust that Ag's implementation of those rules will be adequate to protect the herd. So we'd like to say subject to the provisions of the rules rather than in compliance with.
And what's your perspective on that? Is this just sort of a technical change or is this substantive?
So I think this is, it's on the edge between the two. That said, I think that it prevents an unintended consequence where the department is left in a position where it's trying to determine compliance with another agency's rules that it doesn't have jurisdiction over, or necessarily the expertise to weigh, the fine gradations of how that Agency of Ag would regulate. So, and this will ideally sweep broader and avoid an unintended consequence where someone is not complying with the Agency of Ag rules. And the department isn't able to determine that. And so then the department doesn't regulate them, assuming that they are in compliance. And then so if we just say subject to, you end up without that legal gray area. So I think it prevents an unintended consequence, even if it is sort of on the edge.
Committee members, any objection to this?
I have a question on it. Well, just in general, in terms of violations of this rule, how does Fish and Wildlife do it? Is it a big game violation that is criminally charged, or is it simply a minor violation of Fish and Wildlife?
Well, technically, all of our Fish and Wildlife violations are criminal, except the statute did just change, modifying that based on certain conditions, right? This is not a big game violation, but you would be ticketed with
This would just be a ticket no matter what.
Right.
So even if this stayed as in compliance, a farm could be violated by the Agency of Agriculture and then follow up, violated by Fish and Wildlife, but that would simply be a civil ticket.
Right, and the scope of violations under the Agency of Ag's rule is much broader.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a comprehensive rule related to management of their herd. This would be a much more limited, if you were out of compliance with the Agency of Ag's rules, we'd work in collaboration with them, we'd be able to issue a civil ticket under our authority.
I just wanted to know the scope of that, because in one sense, we'd be changing it so that these farms wouldn't be subject to a criminal offense. Here, we're having it not, so they're not subject to a civil offense either way. I think it's the proper way to do it.
And technically, they currently are. I mean, these rules have been in effect. There's just been this unintended overlap with Ag's jurisdiction up until hopefully now.
Other questions, comments? Okay. Have a motion?
I'll do it. I move that we approve Rule 25P11, Department of Fish and Wildlife, Title 10 VSA Appendix, Section 17. Rule governing the importation and possession of cervids and chronic wasting disease in endemic areas and captive hunt for farm facilities, as further amended today on the record.
We have a motion from Senator Plunkett. Any additional conversation, discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, good on that one. Okay, thank you. Next up is Rule 25P12, turkey seasons rule.
And I believe that Tony McCool, who's our turkey project lead, is joining remotely. Thank you. This amendment to Section 22, again, is fairly discrete. We are proposing to extend the fall archery turkey season to begin on October 1st and extend until the Friday prior to the regular deer season. this would align with the beginning of the deer archery season. And under the current rule, the turkey archery season begins the first Saturday in October. So it's a moving date. So this extends the season anywhere from 1 to 7 days, depending on where that first Saturday falls. And the change to the rule was proposed in response to a petition to the Fish and Wildlife Board. It's consistent with our big game management plan, which encourages liberalizing the fall archery season based on public input. And we don't anticipate this will have a significant impact on the population or take of turkey. It just increases opportunities. Fall archery season takes are often incidental with deer archery hunters who are in the field anyway. So this aligns the two seasons, creates less issue for non-compliance.
Question, as far as an individual petitioning the board for a change, one person can petition and create a change, cause a change to be made to the
Petitions can be submitted by one individual person. The board considers them as, there's a great deal of review that's done before a petition is accepted as to be moved forward into the rulemaking process.
The only reason I ask the question is because one of the processes in place for asking for rulemaking can be by the public. Let's say going to the Agency of Natural Resources and saying, we'd like you to consider it. Think about wake sports. That came from a public petition.
Mhm.
But it requires at least 25 signatories to it. Is that true, Daniel?
I believe so. I was
Not
just
a single person.
checking on that, but that's sort of the statutory requirement that at that point you have to move forward with considering the rulemaking. I don't believe that it would prevent an agency from getting a suggestion from a member of the public and then deciding after consideration that they wish to move forward. But let me just double check that.
It's my curiosity. Something like
Hannah, the regular deer season, does that include youth rifle?
Regular
Regular deer, that term, regular deer season. Is that
The-
include rifle?
youth rifle season is the weekend prior to the regular
Regular
season.
Okay, just.
Or it's currently 3 weekends prior, but we've proposed in this slate of updates.
Damien?
Yeah, so it says, I'm sorry, yes, Mike.
I'm sorry, 3 VSA 806. It's any person.
Okay, so I was actually thinking 3 VSA 31, but that's on existing practices and procedures. Thanks, Mike. So 806, any person may submit a written request to an agency asking the agency to adopt a guidance document as a rule or to amend or repeal a guidance document, or may submit a written request to an agency asking the agency to adopt, amend, or repeal a procedure or rule. And then the agency can go from there. Thank you, Mike. Much appreciated.
So that's true for any agency then, correct?
Yep. That would be any agency. Yeah, the 25 person is if you have an existing procedure. The under 831, there is a 25 persons petition, but it wouldn't prevent the agency from so that's actually that's agency shall initiate rulemaking to adopt an existing practice or procedure as a rule when requested by 25 or more persons, but they may, even if it's just one. There's nothing that prevents them from doing that.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Have a motion?
Make a motion that we approve 25P12, 10 VSA 2230 CP rules.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the rule from Representative Higley. Any additional questions? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next up is Rule 25P13. This is a boost management rule.
And I believe Nick Fortin, who's the Deer and Moose Project lead, will join us. This rule is proposing some updated language that relates to the moose permit allocation process, just to bring the language in the rule in line with what's in statute, to eliminate any confusion. You can refer to the rule to understand how permits are allocated for moose permits. It creates a special opportunity season, which it would allow eligible hunters to hunt with a rifle at a specific time when they're more likely to be successful, pursuant to the point to the statutory section in a second. But and then also would extend the regular season from 6 to 9 days. And this would incorporate a second weekend onto the end of the moose regular season. Again, just to allow more opportunities for hunters who are working during the week, to allow for sort of a weather contingency if you've got bad weather that first weekend, and ideally increase success rates under the permits issued. And I can walk through some of the sections in more detail if that would be helpful for the committee.
Well, the season would go from how many days to how many days?
From 6 to 9.
Well, we're essentially increasing it by 50%. What's the impact on, the moose population's been very variable for various reasons.
Right.
So, okay.
So the Fish and Wildlife Board allocate based on population data that's collected every year. They allocate the number of permits to be issued and the wildlife management units in which they're issued every year. So what this does in the rule is create sort of the framework under which we would allow hunters to use their permits, but the board is still looking every year at the appropriate number of permits to be issued. And I would turn to Nick here for, any more detail on that you think would be helpful, Nick.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. So I don't see this as really affecting the number of moose taken. We have fairly high success rates with moose hunting permits currently, somewhere usually around 60% each year. And New Hampshire has a 9-day season as we're proposing, and their success rates are almost identical to what ours are with a 6-day season. More what this does is, as Hannah mentioned, it avoids impacts from bad weather. So this past year was a great example. We had 4 or 5 really hot days to start the season, and hot weather is terrible for moose hunting. So our harvest was a lot lower than we expected. And that, from our perspective as managers, that makes it hard to predict how many moose are going to be taken. A longer season will allow for more consistent success rates each year, and so we can predict the harvest more accurately. And then, as Hannah mentioned, that way we can allocate an appropriate number of permits each year to harvest the number of moose we'd like to harvest each year.
Thanks.
I can provide some more detail around the special opportunity season also. It would, under 10 VSA 4255J, the board may issue 3 no-cost licenses to persons who have life-threatening diseases or illnesses. And what we're proposing is that the special opportunity season, when you can use one of those 3 licenses, we would allow eligible individuals to take an animal during the 7 consecutive days, beginning the first day of October, with a gun. It's because otherwise that's I believe that is the archery season. Yes, that's the archery season. So the special opportunity season would align with the archery season. But if you hold one of those permits, you can use a rifle during that season. It just increases your success rate, particularly for individuals with mobility issues.
You all set?
Yes.
Any additional, Kev? Okay,
Question that's just curiosity, but how many moose do we believe we had? Do you have an estimate?
Our current statewide estimate is, I believe, around 1,900, 1,900.
How many permits did you give out?
This year we issued 180 permits, expecting to take about 80 some odd moose with that.
And totally out of curiosity, are the moose now like only in the northern part of Vermont? Are we at
Sorry,
that?
can you repeat that?
What's that? He's asking you can repeat the question. Are the vast majority of moose in Vermont in, let's say, the northern third of the state?
Yes. Of those 1,900 or so moose, about half of them live basically in Essex County.
It's curious.
any other questions? Comments? Have a motion?
So,
Go ahead.
I move that we approve Rule 25, P13, Department of Fish and Wildlife, 10 VSA, for the use management rule.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the rule from Senator Bongartz. Any additional discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Last one here is Rule 25P14. This is the deer management rule.
Thank you. The Fish and Wildlife Board's proposing some substantive changes to the deer management rule. These include establishing expanded archery zones. The authority to establish those zones was adopted in the last rulemaking, but in this rulemaking, we're actually, the board is proposing the areas where those expanded archery zones would exist. The proposed rule moves the youth weekend back to the weekend before the regular season. It reinstates the antler point restriction in Wildlife Management Unit D1. Would allow antlerless permits to be used during the regular season. It would remove the archery season closure that currently exists during the regular season. It would allow hunters to hold 2 antlerless permits in different WMUs. It would allow hunters to take a conditional second buck. And in the final proposed rule, this is a change from the proposed rule, we're also proposing to extend the December muzzleloader season 5 days to begin the Monday following the close of the regular season.
That's the extent. I have this document here that's quite thick. Public comment.
Yes.
How would you characterize the comment? Let's say maybe pick 2 or 3 of the top concerns about this.
There was a lot of interest in allowing for the take of antlerless deer during the regular season. This is a change to what's been allowed for the last, I think, 25 odd years. I think that Nick can probably provide more detail about, he was deep in the weeds on the public comment, and he could provide a summary of the sort of highlights there.
I'll do my best. Yeah, I think Hannah's right. By far the bulk of the comments or concerns were related to the taking of antlerless deer during the regular season, what's commonly called our rifle season. That hasn't been allowed since the mid to late 80s when the legislature actually prohibited it. So it's just a change, a cultural change for Vermont hunters. They're not used to it. That said, every single other state that I'm aware of allows that. It's just a change of when deer are taken. It's not going to affect the number. It's just a cultural change to them. So I think that was the probably the biggest issue. The other ones that drew a little attention was allowing hunters to take a second buck. We have a fair number of hunters that feel a hunter should only be allowed to take one a year. But we had far more support for that than opposition. And yeah, I mean, I think those were the biggest ones. The main focus for most hunters is taking antlerless deer during the firearm season, and the concern that is going to result in an over harvest of deer, which we believe is unfounded.
But you've never done this before, correct?
We have never done it before, but again, just like with moose, the Fish and Wildlife Board determines how many antlerless permits are available each year. So we have complete control of how many antlerless deer are taken each year, regardless of when and how they're taken. We control that number ultimately through that annual permit procedure.
The decision to be able to take 2 bucks in the season instead of 1, is that because of determination that the herd can sustain that additional harvest?
Yes, and it's important that you can only take a second buck under certain conditions, and one of those conditions is that you have to harvest an antlerless deer. And so it's actually sort of an incentive to get hunters to harvest more antlerless deer, and we do not expect it to have any substantial to result in a substantial increase in the number of bucks taken because of those conditions.
Other questions? Representative Hickman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a number of questions. I guess following through a little bit on the 2 buck harvest, how is that going to work as far as an individual that does harvest an antlerless deer? What's the turnaround time for that information to get to the department? How do they get the ability to receive that second time?
So the way it's proposed, you have to buy a second buck tag. You can buy that ahead of time. So you can buy that before you shoot any of your other deer. The way the requirement is written is you have to harvest and report your first buck, obviously, and that antlerless deer before you can take the second buck. So almost all of our harvest reporting is now electronic, and our hope is that by 2026, when this would take effect, that it will all be electronic. So we will know immediately when people have reported their deer and are therefore able to take that second buck.
Okay, thank you. And then again, my understanding is this was kind of a controversial vote by, as far as was it just on the controversial vote, just on harvesting antlerless deer during the regular season, but it was a 8-6 vote if I'm not wrong, correct?
By the board, correct?
By the board.
Yes.
So again, generally the board is pretty much unanimous in a lot of their decisions. So I understand that this was, and I did hear from an individual as well. And I looked over a number of the comments. The chair had mentioned what the perception was based on the comments as far as, and I know it may be a hard thing and it wasn't spelled out in the documents that I was looking at, the number of pros and cons. Was there a relationship to the number of people who opposed it compared to the ones who said, yeah, it's a good idea, let's go with it? Was there an actual number there?
So we weren't, I did try to, slot people into a yes or no or support or oppose. And I found it very difficult from a lot of the email comments. We did that at the public hearing, the 5 public hearings that we held. We were able to assign those to a support or oppose, and I don't remember exactly what the number was, but it's something like 60% support for this. So it's not overwhelming support, but it's a majority, a pretty strong majority. Yeah, it was difficult for the email comments because people often comment on a lot of things, and sometimes it's not clear how they fall.
Yeah, and I guess just as a comment, so I've been a hunter all my life. And I certainly understand back in the 80s, the controversy, and went to some of the meetings as well in regards to that doe harvest. I personally agree with a lot of the commenters, and I guess the board members that opposed the doe season during the regular rifle season. It could be a safety issue. It could be an issue of, from what some of the commenters said, as far as individuals wanting to post their land, if they believe that, it's going to be, if it's brown, it's down sort of atmosphere in the woods during the regular season. I know that one of the responses from the Fish and Wildlife Department was that they agreed that limited or restricted access to land is a single biggest challenge to effective deer management in many parts of Vermont. I certainly understand the biology of it, that these doe need to be culled. I'm also a muzzleloader hunter. I certainly appreciate that doe tag during muzzleloader season. I'm concerned as well. I've heard rumors that if it does appear that there's some safety issues or things start to happen, that hunter orange may be considered at some point. I guess that's basically been considered by the legislature in the past and not approved. I would hate to see the Fish and Wildlife Department go forward with that, when one of their comments in a lot of the responses was that Vermont is a very safe state when it comes to its hunting. So I can't see that change. I've also hunted in Maine since I got out of the service in '78. They required orange. I certainly understand that, but I know that a lot of my constituency in the Northeast Kingdom, particularly for whatever reason, they certainly appreciate their hunting in their woolies, whether they're greens or checkered black and white. Anyway, I guess, for me, I'm going to vote no on this particular rule. Again, I have some concerns. I understand the need for harvesting more doe. I think it is critical. I have a neighbor that has all his land posted. He's certainly upset that he can't get a landowner doe permit right off the bat. He has to apply like everybody else in the lottery. I think that's a good rule, though, because I think a lot of folks that post their land like that, whether they got a doe permit or not, they wouldn't use it. And I still think a lot of people do that as well now. So I'm not convinced that it's the best practice to open up the doe season in the regular rifle season. But that's just a comment.
All set, Representative?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other comments, questions? Do you have any response?
Well, I think it is important to note that the requirements for hunter safety have, again, contributed largely to the rates of safety in Vermont. And hunter ed instructors are very explicit on identifying an animal before you discharge your weapon at all. And the board did hear from our hunter education staff about that. And in addition, the department and the board are unable to address the issue around individuals posting their land our responsibility is to manage to implement regulations that we believe will best manage the deer herd based on the biological data we've collected. And we do, we hope that people recognize the value in allowing for access to their land in order to increase harvest opportunities, but we can't control that. So we understand that concern, but from our perspective, it's more important to implement regulations that will ultimately, we think, lead to better management of the herd.
Any other questions, comments? Do you have a motion?
Move that we approve Rule 25-214, Department of Fish and Wildlife, 10 VSA, and it's 37, Deer Management.
Any additional discussion? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Oh,
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And want to thank the committee. Do we have any other items to discuss? All right. We're meeting next on August 7th.
Right.
And we'll potentially have 4 rules that day. So, okay.